And away we go. It's the DFS Other presented by Awesemo.com, brought to you in part by Yahoo DFS. More on their openings and offerings and DFSings in just a moment. We'll talk about that and more on multiple sites when we talk about this four-game NBA slate. Dan Strafford and Adam Scher with you for this Thursday morning DFS Other. Now, Adam, I have a question for you. And one, how are you? That's one question.
Good.
Okay, that's a good answer too. But is there a better feeling, obvious answers aside, is there a better feeling in the world than finding that one nose hair that's been avoiding your clipper for ages and then just finding it and feeling that relief?
I don't have nose hairs. I mean, I guess I do, but I don't have like.
I was gonna say
it's not like an issue for me. I can't relate.
It's the mustache. It all just tracks it down, just pulls it down into it. I'll tell you what, it's an experience. When it sets you free, and it makes for a wonderful day. Not that happened today. Maybe it happened today. I'm fine. I can talk about that. I've talked about much worse here on this podcast, but we're here to talk about 4 NBA games. We have no sirens, no alarms going off in the background, but I cannot promise anything. Who knows? I have 3 kids. They do some crazy shit from time to time. We have, as I said, 4 games. We're going to go game by game, just easier to break it down, easier to really talk about each one individually in that light rather than trying to go position by position on a short slate such as this. Those 4 games for you on tap for Thursday night are, as my page loads, Philadelphia at Boston, Cleveland, San Antonio, Dallas, Detroit, Portland, and Denver. We'll start obviously at the beginning, but Adam, have you noticed any changes for you, shorter slate versus bigger slate, when it comes to cruncher, when it comes to results, like anything that you've noticed as this NBA season has dredged on for you? I know it's been a bit of a struggle, but anything you've noticed, big slates versus small slates?
Not really. I've always disliked small slates compared to bigger ones, just because you kind of have to be more perfect. Like on the bigger slates, the kind of fringy guys end up being 2-3% owned, and if they go off, you still can get by it's having different combinations of players. But on the smaller slates, if that same guy goes off, he's like 15 to 18% owned. So it makes it more difficult. I think, and obviously you get more exposure, or at least I do, to like my core on a smaller slate is going to have higher exposures than on a bigger slate. So it's different, but I approach it pretty much the same. It just ends up being different.
All right, let's talk about this first contest, Philadelphia and Boston. See if we have, shouldn't have a line on. Oh, we do. 210 over under -1.5 in favor of the Celtics, who I believe lost Wednesday night with Kemba Walker having a very solid game, but I believe the Pacers pulled that out. I'll double check that score momentarily as we do record Thursday night here. Gordon Hayward injured in that contest for the Boston Celtics, struck in the face. He did leave the contest from there. And Marcus Smart was out again Wednesday night with his left eye infection. So take that for what it's worth, and obviously apply that where you need to on this slate. I don't see, are there any other injuries that are of note? No, right?
Jamal Murray, I think, is questionable, and so is Millsap.
Okay, for the Nuggets. Great. Okay, so let's talk Philadelphia, Boston here at the top. You have Walker coming off a very solid game. This is more of a defensive-minded squad, both sides. The 76ers and the Celtics are probably 2 of the more respected defenses. May not bear out all the time in the statistical analysis, but these are 2 teams that often are regarded as better lockdown defenders, better lockdown defenses. How do you like this one? Is this one you think on this short slate you'd be targeting to go over ownership on, or is this one that you'll stay away from?
I think on a lot of slates, it's one that I would tend to stay away from. But with the games on this slate not being all that appealing, like you don't have any games that are just true shootouts, I don't think. You're going to get here more. I think that it's a good spot for Embiid. Obviously, in the past, he struggled with Boston, but now he's teammates with Al Horford, and that Boston interior is not as strong as it used to be. So I think that Embiid stands out as a really good option. Pretty favorable pricing on Harris and Horford too. Horford in particular at 5,900 on DraftKings stands out. Even Ben Simmons at 7,600. So I think that the Philadelphia pricing is really soft.
Yeah, it does seem like DK is at it again. I will say it as I often do. Shorter slates, they push down that ceiling pretty far when it comes to top billing on each and every, I would say 3 to 5 game slate. Once you get above 5, it does seem like they stick to the same algorithm we see on the bigger ones. And here it's not nearly the same. Boston on the year, pretty good on opponents' points in the paint, but they're giving up a ton of rebounds on the season. Their front court is having a real struggle with the rebounding, so Embiid makes a ton of sense at a price point that is more than palatable of 9,500, sub 10K here. Do you like Horford in that same vein? Is Horford somebody that you think at 5,900 gives you enough upside, even with him being the third or fourth option when he's on the floor?
Yeah, I think so, because you still get about half of his minutes being at center without Embiid, which is really valuable for him. Normally, he's going to play around 32 minutes, and if you assume Embiid's playing 32 or 33, and Horford's playing every minute that Embiid doesn't play, that comes out to about 50% of his minutes without Embiid, which is really nice. More productive minutes at the 5 as well, which is the case for just about everybody. So, yeah, I think that I would – obviously early, but I would say Embiid's my number 1 Philly guy, and then Horford's right behind them.
How about on the Celtics side? If Gordon Hayward is out, sounds like he was hitting the nose, not seeing anything yet on Twitter specifically about the extent of the injury, but back-to-back, hitting the face, probably gets the night off. We can assume, at least for our purposes here on this podcast. Jaylen Brown get a bump? Does Tatum get a bump? Do you go down the bench a little bit and try to find somebody, especially if Smart is continues to be out? Want to make like one of these guys that maybe we typically stay away from that might have some upside?
Yeah, I think that if Smart and Hayward are both out, it's going to be messy because there's no real – I don't really know how to guess who Stevens is going to go with. Like, it could be Wanamaker. It could be Edwards. It could be we've seen Javonte Green get minutes. So obviously there would be a lot of minutes available if Hayward is out and Smart's out. I think the first thing to do would be to look back at Popcorn Machine and see how the rotation went on Wednesday night once Hayward left the game. That information isn't up yet, so I can't look. But that would be, kind of how I try and recreate the rotation. If there was someone that came in and played a bunch of minutes in Hayward's spot, I would assume that that's the guy that picks up minutes. But also you would get a slight bump in usage for guys like Brown and Tatum and Kemba. Obviously, it won't be very difficult to find the rates for those guys since we just got done with a month of Hayward not playing.
Yep, that makes a ton of sense to me, and I think Popcorn Machine, for those of you who don't know, there's also Add More Funds has game flows. Like, there are a few sites that do this. Popcorn Machine was one of the first, I think the first, that did it in a visual sense for NBA game flows, where you can see players on and off the court together and also sort of hover over and get statistics of that segment of game for the individual player. So popcornmachine.net, I still believe, is that URL. And then Add More Funds is one. They have NBA Wowie on there as well, if you want to do some further research. Any final thoughts, Philly, Boston, before we move on?
Nope.
All right, let's move on to Cleveland and San Antonio. I don't believe there is a line at all on this. No spread, no over-under as of yet. This is an 8:35 Eastern time tip-off. We've talked many times over, I say we in sort of the royal sense, about this podcast at large. This is not a typical Greg Popovich team, right? We know this is not a defensive team. We know this is not a team that is going to get out and defend the way they have in the past. Cleveland is a squad that obviously has some severe shortcomings when it comes to some of their defensive attributes, but they do have some guys who like to shoot. They play at a slower pace, though. Kevin Love's been a shell of his former self over the past few weeks. Is this a game of interest just simply because, as you said, there's not much to like, and maybe there are a couple of one-off pieces here that can build a winning lineup?
Yeah, and there's also a chance that Love sits on the second half of a back-to-back, especially because that game was competitive on Wednesday against Houston. So he played his full minutes. So that would potentially open up minutes for Larry Nance if Love is out. But if he's in, I think that you still can look here because San Antonio is not a good defensive team. You still have pretty cheap pricing. Chetty is still less than 4K. Kevin Porter's at 3,600 coming off of a monster game against Houston. Colin Sexton is 5,400. They're still reasonably priced. They're not quite as favorably priced as they were against the Rockets, but I think you could still go there in a good matchup.
Yeah, and you have enough savings here to get up to some of the Philadelphia players, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the Denver higher ups, and Portland the same. So we'll get to that momentarily. Of course, Luka is on this slate as well against Detroit. Talk about him momentarily. What about San Antonio? Have you cracked the code of which cheap point guard or guard is going to play and play well for Popovich on any given slate?
Well, Popovich supposedly hinted that DeJounte Murray's minutes limit is over. So that is obviously interesting. Murray played 32 minutes on Friday, and Pop implied that he's good to go now. So that's obviously really appealing. Murray, when he's healthy, is a really, really good fantasy producer. And right now he is only 5,600 on DraftKings. It's too cheap of a price tag if he's going to be able to play 32 minutes, especially in a great spot against Cleveland.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, and probably will be fairly highly owned, as everyone has access to that same RotoWire and RotoWorld blurbs that say exactly what Adam just said. Anybody else from San Antonio worthwhile? Is it a LaMarcus Aldridge sort of day at 7K? Can Rudy Gay give you anything in limited minutes here in the mid-20s that gives you upside, or do you feel like it's Murray or bust when it comes to Spurs?
Murray's definitely my favorite, but I think that the pricing on DeRozan and Aldridge is still reasonable. We haven't had San Antonio hasn't played in a really long time. I was trying to find what the rotation looked like for their last game, and yeah, so we got Murray off the bench playing 32. That it is worth mentioning that 5 of those minutes came in overtime. So whether there could certainly be a difference between what he's allowed to play and what he actually does play. But, at least knowing that range of outcomes is there. But Rudy Gay was still in the starting lineup, didn't close. Again, we've seen that happen quite a bit. I think beyond Murray, I would say Aldridge and DeRozan, as usual, are the two top guys.
Is this sort of the NBA attempting to out-pop by giving them 5 days off between games? Like, how does this happen?
It is pretty crazy.
You never see that. You never see a team have that many days off in a row. It's not like they were playing in Hong Kong or anything. So not really sure how that came to be, but we will take it for what it's worth and see if we get major Murray minutes here. A little alliteration here for you on the DFS early bird. Let's continue on, and we get to the aforementioned Luka Doncic. He is our most expensive player on this slate at 11-4, and as he should be, but still, is that too soft, Adam? Have we seen from Luka enough consistency that on any given slate, and I get it, and I say this every time, but I get that every slate is different and pricing matters and all that, but slate to slate matters to me too, and context matters for how good Luka is within the construct of DK's pricing, right? Like the overall algorithm of it all. This seems like a really cheap price point for one of the best players in the NBA.
Yeah, and it's not even if you want to argue that it's not a really cheap price point for Luka. I think when you start looking at all the other salaries, it's just going to be so easy to get him in the lineups. We talked about Horford being really cheap. You talked about the Cavs being cheap. If Love were to sit, you have a $4,100 Nance as a free square, basically. You have a $5,600 Murray. Like, it's just not difficult to get to Luka's salary. So even if you happen to disagree and think that Luka's overpriced even a little bit at 11-4, it's just going to be easy to get him into your lineups, and there's really no reason that he shouldn't be projected as the highest scorer on the slate by probably a lot.
Right. And so what a 4 games, let me take a step back. Every slate ownership matters, right? And every slate you're going to make decisions based off of how that ownership shakes out. But to Adam's point before, you get it much more spread out on a 12-game slate, right? Your studs are going to have a certain percentage of that percentage and so on. Here, Luka's ownership, I think, is going to be very intriguing and lean one way or another. If he's somewhat underowned, it seems like you just, to use a phrase from a different podcast of a bygone era, you jam him in. Like, you figure out a way to get him into your lineup simply because the gross sum of his points should be higher than anybody else. And 11-4, it's not going to be hard to get there. What about the rest of this game, though? I don't think we have a line on this one as of yet either. Nope, that's a lie. So -5 in favor of Dallas, 220 over under. Cleveland San Antonio is now -10.5 in favor of San Antonio. That line just came online. And Denver and Portland now have at least a spread, not an over-under as of yet. But I think we might get a slate where we have nothing over 225 as an over-under is my guess as of right now. But
yeah, it's a pretty unappealing slate in terms of just the games.
Yep. What do you like beyond Luka in this Dallas-Detroit matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine going back to Porzingis. He obviously hasn't been as good as we would hope or as we would expect in the future so far this season, but he also hasn't been bad. He's still over a fantasy point per minute guy. He's still playing 32 to 34 minutes in competitive games. Detroit's not a very good defensive team. You get a lot of blocks from Porzingis, which makes up for some of his struggles offensively. So I still think he's a bit underpriced. I would say that Hardaway is an okay secondary option. Pretty scoring dependent, though.
All right. Anybody from Detroit? Do you go back to Drummond here at 9,600?
Yeah, I don't really see why not. Him and Blake are the two that stand out. Obviously, so Drummond and Embiid, I like Embiid too, as we said, but with a $9,600 salary on Drummond, a $9,500 salary on Embiid, if they are not projected to be basically the same ownership, I would just rather go to whichever one's lower owned.
Right.
You really, in situations like that, I don't think want to get too bogged down in, this guy projects a little bit better, or this matchup's a little bit better. It really, the range of outcomes for both guys is the same. You're going to get more minutes from Drummond normally. So I would give him a slight edge over Embiid, but really I would just rather roster whichever one everyone else doesn't want.
Makes sense to me. And I think that one of the benefits of Awesemo.com, and there are other sites that have it, I think ours are pretty damn good, are ownership projections. Check them out by using the promo code EARLYBIRD. That gets you 50% off your first month of subscription to Awesemo.com. Beyond those projections, you also get the individual player projections. You do get the lineup builder if you're a single entry, or if you're looking to hand build some lineups, a great tool for you to use Alex's projections and grading system to understand how your lineup might grade out against the rest. And then, of course, there's articles and so much more behind the paywall. In front of the paywall, don't forget, we have this show. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, leave a comment. Love to hear from everybody. I read the comments. I don't know if anybody else here does. I know Lawfeed claims he does, so I don't want to call Dave out. Dave reads the comments as well, so I have to give him props for that. But also subscribe here to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the alarm bell, because that makes you aware of whenever we go live. So let's talk about this last game on the slate. And I will remind you before we do that, Yahoo DFS coming up this weekend. They have the 175K baller, $10 entry, 19.5K entries, $175,000 in prize pool there. 30K baller on, what is this? It is Thursday night, 8 p.m. tip, and that is $10 entry, 5K to first place, and it is a max entry of 100 for MME, 3.4K in total entries for that one. So check out Yahoo DFS if you're trying to build that bankroll, maybe play a little bit of a different game than the bigger sites. Get on over there. There are some very good players on Yahoo who are Yahoo specific, but the waters are a little less sharky on any given day than some of the bigger sites that are out there. So let's continue on here and close this out by talking about the final game of the night. As I said, a line just coming out, -6 in favor of Denver for this one. You have Portland and Denver, obviously Jokic and Lillard, Whiteside. Yusuf Nurkic still out, but traveling with the team, which is a good sign for his recovery as he continues to try to get back from that leg injury earlier on this season. But there are offensive pieces here, Adam, right? Like there are individual pieces that could have gigantic offensive games, but it's not necessarily a game that is overwhelming from an offensive perspective. I think that makes sense, right? Like there are pieces here that could have gigantic outcomes, but not necessarily as a whole in this game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a good matchup for Denver. It's a brutal matchup for Portland. Denver's really, really slow. They're good defensively. Denver gets pace up spot against Portland, a really pretty weak Portland defense as well. So I think the edge goes to the Denver side. Jamal Murray said that he's going to play. Millsap still listed as questionable, as is Murray. But if we assume those guys are in, I think that it's a good spot for Murray. It's a good spot for Jokic. And then, good luck guessing how many minutes Millsap plays.
Right. And you made mention of the Q tags there in. Anybody your favorite? Like, is there anyone like that just stands out, or would you rather go to other games first and then fill in some pieces in this one?
I think that Murray stands out because he's reasonably priced, and because the problem with Jokic, I like Jokic here. I like the spot for him, but with Drummond on the slate, with Embiid on the slate, obviously you can only roster so many centers, and I would have those guys at least a little bit ahead of Jokic. So I think that Murray would be the one that's a little bit easier to get to.
All right. Any other thoughts on this contest? Anybody from Portland that at least is, do you go with the Carmelo revenge narrative here?
I forgot he played for the Nuggets.
Yep. I mean, come on. How could you forget?
Yeah. I think Lillard's still too cheap. He's playing 37 plus minutes still in competitive games. He's having his minutes staggered with McCollum and Melo. So really high usage, during those stints. Like I said, it's a really tough matchup, but I think that the price is cheap enough where it doesn't matter all that much.
Overall on the year, Lillard at 27.6% usage, but that has obviously changed since Carmelo has been signed and been playing, again, fairly well. Kudos to Carmelo for apparently almost being ready to hang them up. Portland came calling, and he has done an effective job for them. He still does not play defense, so he is sticking true to his brand, but can score still in this National Basketball Association. So good for him. Any final thoughts across these 4 games, Adam, before you were leaving on a jet plane, right? You get to go get some fun and sun in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, heading to Puerto Rico for the FanDuel Live Final. I'm not participating in it, just going in someone else's place. So get a nice vacation.
Nice vacation, no stress. You just hang out and enjoy the ambiance of it all, the scenery, as it were. So enjoy it. And Adam, you will not be on Saturday morning then, I would assume.
I will not be on anything until Tuesday.
Okay, good for you. So we will not have Adam back till Tuesday. Stay tuned for scheduling notes. I'm sure EMAC can fill you in Slack chat if you have questions about the podcast. And then from the live shows, if you want to ask Josh or find out over on Awesemo.com, feel free. Again, Early Bird is that promo code, 50% off your first month of subscription at Awesemo.com. Tons of stuff behind the paywall. If you're in front of the paywall, like the YouTube videos, subscribe to the channel, hit that alarm bell, subscribe to all of the podcasting apps that you listen on. Make sure you're getting the Early Bird, the NBA Strategy Show, and so much more fed right into your phone or computer. With that said, find Adam on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. Find me at Dan Strafford. Find Awesemo at Awesemo_com. This has been the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com.